In this video, how to use your existing customer data to help you find better customers, convert more sales, and maybe spend a little bit less money on marketing all this time. During the off season, you're thinking about how you can reach more customers, reach out to more people, and thinking about what you're spending on when it comes to marketing. And in that comes, hey, who is it that we're actually trying to reach? Who do we want to be our customer? And there's two paths that you can go down, right? You can spend a bunch of money on marketing. You can put a bunch of ads out there on Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and see how many people you catch. And then maybe of those 1,000 people that call, you convert 1, 2, 3%, maybe 10% of them into paying customers. That can get kind of pricey because you're just putting out, as the phrase is, just throwing stuff out there to see what sticks, right? Just throwing it over the wall, see who comes by to come pick it up. And it's not very effective use of your time or your money because putting together all those ad campaigns can get pretty pricey, both in time and expense, because you're just putting it out there based on the number of people who are going to see it and hoping that the right people come walking by. But what you really want to do is you want to look at, hey, what customers do we serve that we serve well and that we can spend a fair amount of money with us? How do I get more of those customers? Because when you're a contractor, there's a difference between getting calls and getting the right calls, right? You get calls all day long. The phone is basically the bane of your existence. You get calls. You get a lot of price shoppers, looky-loos, people who aren't necessarily in your right range, the customers you like to serve. And you have to manually filter through all of those. But there is a better way. And you can do this yourself. You don't have to hire someone. You can get started with yourself and start to go through the information. And you might hit a point where you want to bring someone else in, but you don't have to. So I'm going to show you how you can get started with that. Finding your target audience really comes down to like 4 steps. You're going to have to get your information together, review the data that you have on your existing customers, put out some surveys to those customers, and then do an analysis. Now, in this video, I'm really going to talk about steps 1 and 2. You have your information, and you get that information together, and then go review that data inside of a spreadsheet. Contractors know spreadsheets may not be the best word to use. That may be something that you want to do because you love spending time out in the field. But trust me, you'll be able to get through this pretty quickly in the off season and then be able to use that information to target the right customers. That way you make more money per job. When you get your information together, you're going to want to start with at least the basic information. The addresses of the customers that you've served, email, if you have their email address. You don't necessarily have to have it in the spreadsheet, just yes or no, do you have that customer's email address? How they paid, what their final bill was, how much money you made on that project. You may not have this in a dedicated system, so you might have to pull this together out of job sheets and work forms that you've had over the last year, 6 months, 3 months. Pull together as many as you can. Do you think you have enough time for? And then start to enter in this information into a spreadsheet. You'll have a header on your spreadsheet, say address, email address, yes or no, payment type, final bill, how much money I made on the project. You at least have that basic information. But then you're also going to want to add some columns that'll be for source, like where did the customer come from? How did they find out about you? The project type, the property type, timeline. There's more stuff that you can add on. So these are just some things I thought of off the top of my head. I'm going to get a little deeper into that. First of all, with source, how did they learn about you? How did they find you? Were you making YouTube videos? Were you running Facebook ads? Did someone refer you on Facebook? Did they just give you a referral? They were a neighbor. Did they do a Google search? This is something you probably ask in the very beginning of a project. If you haven't asked this question, you just add it to your questionnaire when you go out and do a quote. Hey, how did you find out about me? And mark that down. Be consistent with it. Don't do things like referral neighbor or referral church, referral job fair. You want to be, as generic as possible. Try and get them into as few buckets as possible. That way, when you pull the information together, you can add subcategories to that later. But let's just start with the very high level. How did they find out about you? Then you also want to look at what kind of project it was. And again, consistent and uniform. Be specific in the number of buckets that you have and as narrow as possible. So was it residential custom? Was it commercial construction, repair, service, maintenance? What was it? What was the main type of work, the primary work that you did out on that job? I'm sure you did a lot of different things out there, but what was the primary purpose that you were out there? Now, again, if you want to add subcategories to that, you want to say you went out to did a service and then you ended up doing custom construction, then you can add that stuff onto there, because I know there's some jobs go out, you're just going to replace something and it ends up into a bit bigger project. You might flip that then too. You might say, well, the project ended up being a custom construction and also a subcategory that as we did some service work on the job site. The property type, again, consistency is key. Was it a home, an apartment complex? Were you doing street work? Was it for the public works department? Was it a bank? Was it a school? Try and keep it as narrow as possible, as specific as possible. And that way you can easily identify and go down the list of all the different property types that you served. Because when you start to pull that information, if you have to look at like, well, I'm looking at homes, but I split them up in a bunch of different categories. So there was like home ranch, home track, home, historic. So it's get hard to tell. They're all kind of the same, right? Now, if you want to grow a particular property type within that home category, then you can continue to subcategorize it down and then figure out what types of customers those were. But let's just start with the very, very high level. What was the property type? I would also recommend looking at a timeline. Having that information from the time when they first contacted you to when you gave a quote, when the job started, what was that timeline? Because this is going to be really important later when you look at how long is my conversion from the first time I talk to a customer to the time that I actually start on the job. Now, sometimes that could be a really long time because you booked out. You have 6 months worth of work. You're not going to be able to get there for another 6 months. So maybe narrow that timeline down. First contact to quote. That way you can see how long is it from when I go and actually talk to the customer to when they agree to do the job. Now, my signal in my marketing tasks, maybe I need to email some people automatically throughout a certain time period to make sure that we convert. Or maybe it happens really quickly, so I don't want to send any emails or any mailers or have any phone calls in there because the customer makes up their mind pretty quickly. Or you might want to send one day of because it converts so fast that you want to get them before they go talk to another contractor. You just want to look at that timeline. How long is that? You might also find gaps in your performance too. From the time they first contact to the time I quote, I realize it's 51 days. That's way too long for me to get a quote. No wonder I'm not converting on as many accounts as I would like because it's too long for me to get out there and take a quote. And then you find where the pinch point is. Oh, it ends up being me because I'm so busy. Okay, let's train someone else on the staff to be able to go out and give a quote. That way it's not 100% dependent on me. Or let's train someone to do some of the field work that I do. That way I can turn out more quotes. The timeline is going to be really important. And you're really looking for the trends in that. Global overall trends. Trying not to be too specific, just in general terms. What's happening? How long is that timeline taking? And then with the address, and the reason why I think the address is really, really important in having when you're looking at this quantitative data for your customers is you want to see where they are on the map. What neighborhoods are you consistently serving? Where do they live? Are you performing better in certain neighborhoods over some? Are there some that you want to add? So you can see where in relation your current jobs are to where you want to be working. That'd be a reason to put it onto a map. Maybe you're doing routes, it's for maintenance. You want to see on a map where your routes are going. You want to see, okay, how can I add in stops on these routes? I can see where I'm performing, and these are the areas that I'm going to do marketing in because my trucks are already heading in that direction. There are lots of services that you can pay to be able to do this, but if you're just wanting to get started and you're doing it yourself and you don't have a lot of money to spend on it, you could do it yourself inside of Google Maps. You could create yourself a custom map. Start putting in addresses. I think you can even import a spreadsheet into Google to make a custom map, and then you can use that information to start taking some guesses at the trends or where you want to put some effort into growing your accounts. But you can't really make that decision unless you are visualizing it really well. So it's really, really important that you take the data that you have existing and put it into a format that is easy for you to read. That's why I'm saying you're going to take the basic customer information and put it into a spreadsheet. You're going to take your addresses and put it into a maps form. That way you can look at the information and look for trends, those dates, those addresses, those total profits on jobs, those project types or property types. And then look at that, start to understand, okay, it looks like I do really well in the combination of maintenance on apartment complexes in this general area, because I can see that I turn those quotes out faster. Boom, boom, boom. I can get to those customers a lot faster. Or you might see the opposite. You might say, oh, look, we're not making any money on our residential custom construction. And I can see a trend in it's really slow for us to quote these jobs. And these jobs are really far away from our office. So, but I want to keep doing residential construction. So I'm going to adjust my marketing so that it's in zip codes and neighborhoods that are nearer to my office. That way I have a better chance of being able to make money on that project. And these really aren't just the first two steps. This is steps 1 and 2 when it comes to your customer information. Step 3 will be to actually send out surveys to your customers, but that's going to be in a different video. And I'll talk more about how you can use surveys to understand better qualitative data about your customers, why they chose you, the who, how, and why questions. That way you can use that information along with your customer data to figure out what your marketing strategy is going to be for the next 6 months, the next year, the growth strategy for your company. Just remember that correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because you see a trend doesn't mean that you should just jump both feet into that. Test, 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 go slowly. Come up with an idea, a framework, and give it a shot. Put a small budget to it. Reach out, try some new things, but you're not going to jump all the way in on it. You're going to go out there and you're going to test a little bit. You're going to realize that I want to grow in a certain neighborhood with this type of construction because I make a lot of money on that. Well, then pick out a plan, start small, put a little budget to it, spend a little bit of time on it, and see how it performs. Then, if it's performing well, you can do another bigger test. And if it's doing a bigger test, then you can start to develop a full-time strategy. So that's what I got in this video and this presentation. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. If you would like to read more about this topic, you can head over to my website, cortexsolutions.com, and there's a longer blog about putting together your customer information and targeting your right audience. That's what I got this time. I'll catch you next time. See you later, pals.